So I'm going to be doing this video a little bit differently than the normal style. I'm going to do the audio only with the PNG avatar. The reason I'm doing that is because one of my lights is out and I need to replace it, but I want to talk about this now. So rather than give you an inferior look to the video, I'm just going to do it this style, but it's not going to be an every video kind of thing. Also, for those of you who are unaware, I have recently decided to make myself a Parler account. My account username is the same as this YouTube channel, Actual Justice Warrior. So check the link in the description and go over there and follow me there. And for those of you who think that Parler is pronounced parlay, I just want to say that you are actually 100% right on that account. The problem is that when setting up this account, the company decided to reach out to a bunch of YouTubers in order to promote the app. And unfortunately, Lauren Chen was completely incapable of pronouncing it as parlay, and because she was so bad at it, and she kept pronouncing it Parler, the entire company actually changed the name of the company, how they intended for it to be pronounced, in order to suit her lack of ability to pronounce this in its original French form. So that is a true fact. It is 100% factual. It is not sarcastic in any way, shape, or form. And I think after you sign up for my account, you should go over to her videos and let her know that it's actually pronounced parlay. Now, with all that out of the way, I want to go over the main topic of the video, which is what was going on with Bubba Wallace and NASCAR and this alleged hate incident. And first, I want to start off by saying that the reaction to this alleged hate incident was exceedingly wonderful on the part of the other NASCAR drivers, on the part of the company, and on the part of the fans overall. Everybody was incredibly respectful. They actually symbolically pushed out Bubba Wallace's car in front of their event, which I thought was quite honorable. Obviously, this is evocative of images like Pee Wee Reese putting his arm around Jackie Robinson in his hometown, showing people that no matter what color or creed you are, sports is a meritocracy, and an attack on one athlete or one teammate is an attack on all athletes and all teammates. So really respectable to how NASCAR responded at the time when they thought this incident might have actually been real. I even like the symbolism of Bubba Wallace coming out of the car with an American flag mask, showing that the American ideal is not aligned with hatred and bigotry. I thought that that was amazingly respectable to both the fans of NASCAR, and it made a very powerful statement when they thought this was a legitimate attack. However, as we've seen time and time again, with these type of incidents, we ended up in a very familiar place, and that was that this was really a gigantic nothing. That the thing that was allegedly, supposedly, the hate symbol, the noose, that was put in Wallace's garage, was in no way, shape, or form that thing. In fact, it was in actuality a garage pull meant to close the garage door. Now, at the beginning of this story, a lot of people had these very same suspicions. The initial day when this was announced, right next to Bubba Wallace's name on the trending tab on Twitter, was Jussie Smollett's name, who notoriously staged a hate crime against himself. Now, one of the reasons why people were suspicious of this incident from the jump is that it's incredibly difficult for random people, like fans of NASCAR, to get in the area where the cars are stored. And this makes all the sense in the world. These cars go over 200 miles per hour on this track. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever to let random fans in those areas where they could do damage to these cars that could end up having fatal consequences. So it was heavily implied that it had to be a member of NASCAR staff that ended up leaving this rope, or even a member of Bubba Wallace's staff from the jump that had access to this area in order to put this there, which seemed rather absurd considering NASCAR's very public stance and being in support of Bubba Wallace since he entered the sport. This is not a new thing, them backing him, them promoting him. This has been NASCAR's thing with this specific driver because they're trying to change the perception of their image, and they have been for years. Now, another thing that people found suspicious is that Bubba Wallace said that he never actually personally saw what was described to the public as a noose that was left in his stall, which is very interesting because despite the fact that he was claiming not to have seen this item, he was going all over television saying that this was for sure a 100% hate crime attack against him and his person. That's a weird thing for you to say when you're claiming that you never even saw a picture of what was alleged to have been left in your garage. Now, the reason it's incredibly important to establish these details before covering this story is because it turned out that what was spotted in Bubba Wallace's garage was in no way, shape, or form a noose meant to be a racially targeted attack against him. It was actually a rope attached to the garage that was used to pull the garage closed. It was a garage pull, and it had been there as far back as 2019 and possibly many years prior to that. And the reason we know that this dates back to at least 2019 is because another NASCAR driver had a YouTube video that was put out in 2019, which was talking about his car and how they do the prep for his car, and you can actually see what was described as a noose, and the FBI sent 15 agents to investigate this alleged hate crime, and what they discovered was that the alleged noose was this exact same garage pull. Now, at this point in the story, despite my initial suspicions and some of the suspicious details that led up to the FBI investigation that subsequently determined that there was no crime actually committed, I am willing to believe it was an honest mistake. I am willing to believe that somebody oversensitive on behalf of Bubba Wallace mistook this for something that it wasn't. As long as Bubba Wallace comes out and gives a statement saying, hey look, this didn't happen, I'm glad it didn't happen because it's a very good thing that this didn't happen. And one of the things that I was so moved by during this process was how much NASCAR, the company, and all the other drivers, just based on the idea that this could happen, showed their support for me. How quickly these guys all came to my defense and got my back. How much they showed me that I am appreciated in this sport. Even though this didn't happen, and it's a good thing that this didn't happen, I am honored, and honestly I'm filled with joy based on the response to the idea from the fans, from NASCAR, from the other drivers, from everyone involved in this. That is incredibly moving, and I'd like to move on. However, Wallace did not do that. Wallace decided to start releasing statements saying that he was upset that people were questioning his character, and then he made a notoriously bad appearance on CNN with Don Lemon. And I'm going to go over the video of this incident because I think it's really important that you see the interview for yourself, but pay very close attention to Wallace's body language, especially when he's doubling down. Because when he's defending himself and defending his character and talking about how NASCAR had his back, he is direct, he's looking straight into the camera, and he's making his points incredibly clear. However, when he starts talking about how it's still a noose and they have some weird photographic evidence, and he's seen photographic evidence that proves that this is legit, despite the fact that he had previously stated clearly and unequivocally that he never saw this, he starts getting shifty, and he can't look Don Lemon directly in the face, or he can't look the camera directly in the face. You can tell a lot about this man's body language as he's doubling down on something that he clearly knows at this point, whether it was staged or not, was just not something that actually happened in reality.
I don't know what time it was, about 5:30, 6 o'clock on Sunday evening after the race has been called. Garages are closed. My crew is on a plane back to North Carolina, and I get a phone call from, I'm in my motorhome. I get a phone call from the president, Steve Phelps, and it's a phone call, Don, that I'll never forget. It's one of those phone calls where you can automatically tell within the first couple seconds that something's wrong. Mm-hmm. And it immediately made me think of, oh, what did I do? What am I getting suspended for? Like, what did I say wrong in an interview? Whatever it was. And so I'm thinking all the bad things or whatever it could have been that I had done, whatever I said. So he's like, we need to talk in person. So I'm like, okay. So he walks down the motorhome, opens up the door, and the look that he had on his face alerted me in a way that I'll never forget as well. And it's still thinking like, okay, what did I do? Let me know. And now, mind you, I got to the racetrack at, I don't remember what time, 9:30, 10 o'clock, and slept all day just because that's all we were able to do, go straight to my motorhome. That's the only place where I'm allowed to go. I'm not allowed to be in the garage. Mm-hmm. But the conversation that I had with Steve Phelps was I would say, and I'm speaking for him, I would probably say one of the hardest things, if not the hardest thing he's ever had to tell somebody. Tears rolling down his face, choked up on every word that he was trying to say. That the evidence that he had brought to me that a hate crime was committed. Never seen the news. I never reported it. Like I said, I was going to dinner
Well, let me
to
jump in here,
enjoy
Bubba.
time.
So right there, you can see him state clearly and unambiguously that he never actually saw this. In fact, he was called by somebody at NASCAR who ended up telling him that this happened to him, that this was found in his garage. So he's saying he didn't see it there. Now, this is notable for two reasons. One, because later in the same interview, as I will show you, he will contradict this statement by saying that he has clear and unambiguous evidence, basically going up against the conclusions of the FBI, which is completely absurd and ridiculous. The FBI sent 15 investigators to look into this, and they determined that it was a garage pull. But secondly, this is probably the most similar to Jussie Smollett that Bubba Wallace has ever been throughout this whole incident, because he is focusing so much on the very specific details of how he found out about this, despite the fact that these details are irrelevant and this kind of behavior feels rehearsed and is actually more indicative of deception if you talk to body language experts and experts on deception than it is in fact indicative of truth-telling. Typically, when a traumatic event happens to you, the irrelevant ancillary details that a liar would rehearse are not the first things that would come to mind to somebody who is telling the truth. But again, as long as he's consistent, which he's not, I can see people overlooking this point of the interview. However, he's not consistent, as we find out later in the very same interview.
Don, the image that I have and I have seen of what was hanging in my garage is not a garage pool. I've been racing all my life. We've raced out of hundreds of garages that never had garage pools like that. So people that want to call it a garage pool and put out old videos and photos of knots being in their as their evidence, go ahead. But from the evidence that we have, that I have, it's a straight up noose. The FBI has stated it was a noose over and over again. NASCAR leadership has stated that it was a noose. I can confirm that. I actually got evidence of what was hanging in my garage, over my car, around my picker guys, to confirm that it was a noose, and never seen anything like it. It's not something I talked to my crew chief about. I said, is this something like, I wanted to make sure we weren't jumping the gun. And I said, this isn't a knot. This isn't just a regular old whatchamacallit. He's like, Bubba, this isn't something that can be done within a second of just tying a knot and being on the way. This is something that took time.
So what are you saying here? Are you saying that you don't believe? Do you believe that it was intended for you in that way, or what are you saying here?
It was a noose. It was a noose that was whether tied in 2019 or whatever. It was a noose. So it wasn't directed at me, but somebody tied a noose. That's what I am saying.
Mm-hmm.
It is a noose.
Yeah. Let me just read from NASCAR here.
So here you see Bubba Wallace doubling down on the fact that this did in fact happen to him, that the object left in his garage was in fact a noose, and this is notable for a number of reasons. First and foremost, this is completely unnecessary. As I told you earlier in this video, and as you can see, where Don Lemon is attempting to lead this man, he doesn't have to double down on the veracity that this was actually a legitimate noose. This could have easily been attributed to an honest mistake. People don't want to believe that Bubba Wallace is somebody who is promoting something that's false. That is something that he is worried about, and yes, people on the internet are accusing him of it, but the overall majority of people did have Bubba Wallace's back in the media, and clearly Don Lemon has his back. But that's something that he's worried about, which is very indicative of deception. Also, again, right here, he is incapable of making contact with the camera. He's looking down, he's looking away, he looks uncomfortable, and this is where he's supposedly making his honest stand. And the third thing that is incredibly notable about this awkward portion of this interview that makes Bubba Wallace look incredibly guilty is that now, all of a sudden, Bubba Wallace is talking about evidence, and maybe photographic evidence, that contradicts what the FBI is saying. He is asserting clearly and unambiguously that there is in fact evidence to the contrary to what the FBI investigators have determined. He is saying that he is aware of this evidence, that he's seen this evidence, and this evidence is something completely different from a garage pole. It looks nothing like a garage pole. And he also randomly says that somebody did something with Photoshop, or he implies that somebody did something with Photoshop in order to make him look bad. So it's not only the fact that he's seen evidence that definitely contradicts the FBI's findings, but also he's seen some evidence being put forward online that is clearly photoshopped in order to make him look bad. So he's putting forward the argument that there is some kind of conspiracy against him, which is completely absurd. This is a point where he is making an affirmative stance that despite what the FBI is saying, this did in fact happen to him, according to him, and he has seen physical evidence to prove the FBI's claims to the contrary. And I know I'm saying that clearly and repetitively, but it's very important to distinguish between his previous statements and this statement right here, and that's something important to note when we go over his future statements, because he then kind of walks that back without acknowledging what he claimed on this show with Don Lemon. Now, the logical follow-up to statements like this is, what is this evidence, where is it, and how can I, the journalist Don Lemon, have access to view this evidence for myself, to judge this evidence for myself? But Don Lemon, of course, doesn't ask any of these logical follow-up questions because he's too busy having a mini meltdown of his own on his own face, as he knows this interview is not going well for Bubba Wallace. Now, let me be clear. I don't want this to be a hoax. I don't want Bubba Wallace to have lied to the American people and to have implicitly attacked the fans of NASCAR or some people who worked at NASCAR as potentially perpetrators of this crime. I would much rather be willing to believe, and I actively want to believe, that this was just a mistake, it's an overreaction in a climate where people are currently obsessed with race, but I can't ignore that this happened. I can't ignore that this was stated from this guy's own mouth, that he has contradictory evidence to what the FBI has presented. I can't ignore him saying that he never saw it, and then later in the same interview saying that he did in fact see it, and it is distinct from what the FBI is describing. This brings up logical follow-up questions like, who originally found this and reported this? And who decided that something, despite the fact that they may have initially mistook it for a noose, that is used to close the garage door, was probably not placed there as a way to mock Wallace. It was probably, since it closes the garage door, placed there to close the garage door. Look, we deserve the answers to these questions. This is an issue that cannot be let go. It's not an issue that you can just brush under the rug. All of a sudden today, just prior to me recording this audio, Bubba Wallace released a statement on Twitter saying, hey, look, it didn't actually happen. It was a mistake, and I'm glad it didn't happen. He released the correct statement, and he's like, I'm happier to be embarrassed about this than to have had this happen to me. But this is directly in contradiction to what he said on Don Lemon the night prior. So what changed? What changed from this irrefutable evidence that looks like nothing that Bubba Wallace had ever seen in a garage before, that is contradictory to the FBI's conclusions about what happened, that he was talking about, again, less than 24 hours prior to him releasing the statement that I wish he would have released. I would have been happy to let this go had that Don Lemon interview not happen. I would have been happy to let this go had this been the first statement that Bubba Wallace put out. But it's not. And the fact that it's not needs to be addressed. The fact that he said things that are either verifiably false, contradictory to his previous and post statements, needs to be addressed. And while I'm certain that there are fans of NASCAR who don't want the sport focusing on race issues in the first place, and they'd much rather have the sport focus on race issues like it's supposed to, I think these questions should in fact be addressed. But those are just my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below of this video. Now, you guys know the drill at this point when it comes to this channel. If you like this video, then hit the like button. If you want more people to see it, hit the share button. You should follow me on all my other social media platforms that are linked in the description box of this video. Follow me on Parler, which is the new one that I joined, and support me via the support links. This has been me going over the Bubba Wallace thing. Till next time.